Have you ever worn a smartwatch, used a body fat scan, or a calorie tracker app to feel more in control? Chances are most of you have, and it feels really good to see how many calories you've burned, or how active you've been, or how well you've slept. But what if I told you those tools are lying to you about everything? In fact, smartwatches can have false measurements with an error of up to 50%, meaning that if the number on your screen says 3000 calories burned, the reality could be that you've burned as little as 1500. And it doesn't just stop at calories. These very same devices are now rating your sleep and recovery, and that opens up a whole new can of worms. But first of all, how do these smartwatches actually work, and how do they even get those numbers? Well, on the underside of most smartwatches, they have a green or infrared LED light which shines through your skin, and a tiny sensor inside of that watch which will use that light to read how your blood moves and use that to estimate your heart rate. And inside of the watch you will usually find something called an accelerometer and a gyroscope which measure movement and orientation. Basically, they see how much and how fast your wrist is moving, and they have algorithms which recognize things like steps, so it knows when you're walking versus just pulling the skin flute. And most high-end and expensive watches also track stuff like skin temperature, blood oxygen saturation, and different lights to assess sleep and stress. But where the real magic happens is within the watch's algorithm, which pops your data into a system, and using metrics like your sex, height, weight, and age, it estimates how many calories you've burned, what your VO2 max is, how well recovered you are, etc, etc. So what's really the issue here? Doesn't this just mean that it estimates everything based on some objective measures? Shouldn't that at least be somewhat accurate? Well, not exactly. They measure movement and pulse, and then run it through a big math formula and just guess the rest. This guess can be useful, but it's ultimately still a guess. And if you want your watch to give a more accurate guess, you have to provide a lot of data. And when you're walking or running, a lot of the time, these watches can mess up something as simple as measuring your pulse. And to make your metrics more accurate, you need to purchase more tools. The exact same thing can be said for sleep. New research shows that the sleep score itself might affect some people more than their actual sleep quality. So if you slept alright, but the watch says that your recovery was bad, then that gets into your head and you start to feel under-recovered. And when you start obsessing over perfect sleep scores, more so than your actual sleep, you get what many researchers refer to as orthosomnia. And people who obsess over sleep scores tend to actually have worse sleep than those who don't. So you have an inaccurate measuring tool which gives you a guess based on an algorithm that doesn't always fit, and if you start relying on those measurements on top of that, you actually end up worse off than if you simply never use the tools at all. And this obsession doesn't get any better, because these apps or companies often say that you can just buy more products to get more accurate scores. And while that is true to some degree, the obsession over having data about your body never stops. And it might eventually transform into a disorder where you feel out of place if you don't know exactly what is going on within your body. And that's another thing. How do you know if your body is changing the way you want it to? Do you just look in the mirror, take pictures every day, or do you use something like a fat scale? These things have become insanely popular in recent years because they make measuring something like your body fat seem effortless. Just stand on a scale and you will receive an electrical signal which tells you exactly how much body fat you have. But how would this even work if something like the DEXA scan, which is the gold standard of body fat measurement, has a standard error of up to 10%? Now, if you're 20% body fat, that means it could estimate you at between 18 and 20% most of the time, which isn't that bad. But considering a new DEXA machine can cost well over $100,000, it's not something that the average person will ever come close to using. Meanwhile, a $200 to $300 bathroom scale can have a relative error of up to 30%, which means that if your body fat is 20%, the measurement could cough up any number between 13 and 27%. The number on the scale becomes something else entirely, and it cannot be used to reliably track fat loss better than any visual assessment like taking pictures or weighing yourself. The whole fat loss industry has always aimed to have methods of objectively assessing body fat, from calipers, which require a lot of skills and accuracy to use, to massive machines which supposedly do everything for you. But the wellness industry has shifted towards making these rather complex things seem almost trivial by making cheap machines and claiming that they do a lot more than what they actually do. And this comes across very clearly when we talk about calories. Calorie tracker apps have become oddly popular these days, with AI models supposedly designed to estimate how much you're eating based on a picture. And while these functions may save a lot of time compared to tracking your food manually, it also produces faulty measurements. Sure, if you took a picture of something like an apple, the guess may be within a 5% margin of error, which at worst could be around 10 calories. But what about a complete meal, one that uses several ingredients, including cooking oil and meat? How would the AI know exactly how much oil was used, or what fat content the meat had? What about the size of it, or the density? The things that most people already have problems tracking seem to become even less accurate for AI models the more complex the food becomes. A standard pizza of say 1,000 calories may have a margin of error of 30%, which means it could tell you that the pizza had 700 calories, which if you add up over time might be enough to stop you from reaching your desired goals, because 300 calories per day would equal to around 2,100 per week, which adds up to a full day of eating. So what can you even do to combat this? Are there any good ways to really track your progress, food or sleep that are actually worth doing? And to that I say, luckily yes, though they're not as easy or as objective as a smartwatch tries to be. For muscle gain, the best indicator is usually performance. If you are getting stronger in the gym, especially on exercises you are used to doing, then a big reason for that is muscle gain. You can also look for things like your weekly body weight averages over time, and perhaps most of all, take some progress pictures. But don't get fooled by week-to-week pictures, because muscle growth is an incredibly slow process that takes time to visually notice. One picture every month or so would likely be a good place to start. For calories though, you can never really know your exact maintenance, because it's not a fixed number like most people think. Instead, it works like a range and depends on what you've eaten that day, how active you've been, how hydrated you are, how stressed you are, etc. So again, using your average weekly body weight can actually be a great way to assess whether or not you are gaining or losing weight. And if you want to get really down and dirty, you can use some actual food tracker apps, track what you eat for say a few days, and then get a better grasp of how much or how little you should be eating to get closer to your goals. And for sleep, honestly the best way to tell if you've slept well is how you feel. If you feel fatigued and you woke up several times throughout the night or only got 6 hours instead of 8, then that's a much better indicator than a sleep score from a watch. If you feel good, then you probably are, and if you want to ensure high sleep quality, make sure you don't consume caffeine late, turn off all your stimulus an hour or so before bedtime, and sleep in a room that is both dark and cold. Of course, some people will have good sleep regardless, and some will always struggle. But using these tricks is going to be more effective than just about any other non-medical treatment. And yeah, there are still tons of great digital tools which can help you track performance, but make sure you're aware of how they extract information, how reliable and valid these measurements are, and if they are making bold claims like how they're better than well-established gold standard tools, then I would recommend steering away. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.